The other issue with the Patriots, I touched on this earlier. They're looking for a new head of football operations. We've seen different titles, but basically, whatever the job is, it is a job that requires compliance with the Rooney Rule in the interviewing process. Earlier this week, Ben Volen of the Boston Globe said that the Patriots have already complied with the Rooney Rule. There have been multiple reports since then suggesting they haven't, and I think where the confusion is, and this is based on an article from Doug, I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I've seen it written for years. Kyed. Kyed?
Yeah.
I don't know. And Doug, I apologize. I've written it many times. I've never had to say it before. We'll go with Kyed. His article from the Herald from 2 days ago, and also the NFL pointed out some things to me as it relates to the transparency requirements. We wrote about this last night at PFT. They complied before the draft insofar as they didn't have to do anything by way of complying with the Rooney Rule to have the structure in place because there really wasn't someone there that had the power, which points to ownership. Like, if none of the people currently working for you have the power, then who's making the choice? And there's been this sensitivity about how involved are the crafts. Well, if there was no one there that held a job that required Rooney Rule compliance, who's making those calls if no one has that job? That void gets filled by ownership necessarily. If you don't have a GM, you are the GM. I hadn't thought of that until just now. So if we're going to say they didn't have to comply with the Rooney Rule for the structure they had in place before the draft, then there was no one with the power necessary to make that call because nobody had to satisfy the Rooney Rule to put the person in place who would have had that power. Beyond that, going forward, they have to comply. So they complied pre-draft because no one had that job. Post-draft, what did we see? What did we see over the past several days? A string of no thank yous from minority candidates for the job because everyone knows Elliot Wolf is getting the job. Now, they've managed to get some guys to interview. Samir Suleiman, a longtime front office employee, currently not involved or affiliated with any team. He said yes to the opportunity. You think they're going to hire him to be the GM of the team? Do you think they're going to hire anyone other than Elliot Wolf? And this is the problem they created by not filling the job pre-draft. When you try to thread needles, when you try to have it both ways, you create this problem for yourself. And they became dangerously close, Charean, to landing in the same mess that Matt Millen was in 20 years ago when he hired Steve Mariucci, and everybody else said, no, thank you, I'm not interviewing because we all know you're hiring Steve Mariucci, and Millen got fined $500,000 for failing to comply with the Rooney Rule.
Yeah, and Mike, you made the point that I was going to make. This really feels like to me that Robert and Jonathan Kraft are going to be more involved in personnel decisions. It really feels like that to me. And you know, they couldn't do that obviously with Bill Belichick as the de facto GM, but now I think they say, hey, we could be more involved in this process. And it's just what we talked about. Owners want to have a hand in who you're drafting, why you're drafting, why are we bringing this player in, what are we doing in free agency, all those things. And it just feels like to me now the Krafts, Bill Belichick's gone, we can be involved in this. This is a team that hasn't had a GM by the GM title since 1990. That was the last year of Pat Sullivan. That's the last time they had a GM by that title. Since then, they've had de facto GMs, and this one's going to be called Executive Vice President of Player Personnel. But again, why it's such a weird hiring process? Why wasn't this done before the draft? Because you weren't going to have Elliot Wolf, as you said, draft Drake and say, oh, by the way, now we're hiring a GM and this is the quarterback that you're going to have, Drake May. Welcome to New England. It just wasn't going to happen like that. Elliot Wolf's going to get this job. And if he doesn't, it's going to be a huge upset, but he's going to get the job. He drafted the quarterback. He's tied to this quarterback. His job is tied to this quarterback for the foreseeable future. So the whole thing to me is just kind of weird.
And when you consider how there were various opinions about Drake May within the league, some people really liked him. Some people did not like him very much at all. Chris Sims had him at 6th in his own independent evaluation of the film of the top 6 quarterbacks. You bring in somebody new, they may be a Drake May hater in Wolf's clothing because they're not going to lead with at the interview, man, you guys really screwed it up taking Drake May. He's going to come into the job. I want the job. Drake May, great. We've seen that with coaches before. When Josh McDaniels went to Denver, Jay Cutler's great. First order of business, Jay Cutler's gone. You can have that dynamic filter into your organization where the person in charge of football operations just doesn't like Drake May. That's a problem. So this is how they tried, I think, to balance it. And this is the key line. This is what I was looking for earlier. By the way, it's Doug Kyde. We apologize, Doug, but thank you, Pete. It's Doug Kyde. Rhymes with Hyde. Got it right the fifth time. The Patriots were in compliance with the Rooney Rule before the draft because, per the league, there wasn't a singular person in the primary personnel position and because there were no changes to anyone's title. That means no one was running the show, which means ownership was running the show. And this gets back to that, and there was a lot of sensitivity, and this was all happening as the Apple TV Plus documentary was coming out, and people were saying, man, how involved were the Crafts? And are the Crafts really involved? And they're all involved. They all have a spoon in the stew. That's been my point for the past month. They're all involved. This loophole that allowed them to not hire, unless it's not true and they really had secretly given Elliott Wolf full power over the football operation, and I'm going to assume that what the league said is accurate. If that's the case, who's got final say? Nobody. So it's ownership making the call. If no one has the power, the only one left to have the power is the owner. So by trying to navigate the current mess they're in, the Patriots have admitted to the world that Drake May was an ownership choice. So we got to take a break. So I'll write something about that PFT, but I think that they've accidentally told a truth that they probably would prefer not to tell. We'll tell some more truths, or hopefully something close to truths, when PFT Live continues right after this. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.